Yes, y'all, good morning, good morning, good morning. Woo. I know when yesterday they were like, well, breakfast starts right promptly at 7. And you could see the whole visceral recoil across the room, like at what time? And I'm like, ugh. And then they said, well, no, baby, you don't have to be here and cognizant and joyful until 9. And I'm like, let the joy commence. So we are here and ready, and we know that yesterday we had an amazing time talking about the power of making change simply through being vulnerable and sharing our stories, and that we have more ability to cause real change, personal transformation, and to extend authentic invitation into the work of justice and the journey of justice by just being real, then learning every paradigm, reading every fabulous, wordy, heady book, and memorizing every incredibly important study and all of the fabulous statistics and peer-reviewed data that goes with it. We love those things too, but that's why we just hire Keynotes to give us the 2-minute version, because any of y'all got that kind of time laying around? No, because you out there doing that work. Amen, and God bless and thanks be to God for you. So what we're focusing on in our little 20-minute pop-ups, we had one last night to talk about the social change map, an easy, downloadable, free, and accessible tool to help us shift our focus to what are we doing and how can we extract as much production out of it as possible, to saying, what if we focused on remembering our why and recognizing that our why, or our son words, can actually help us equally value all the different phases of our life, our work, and our resistance. Because if we get to the point where our body's like, oh no, honey child, you're not meant for that on the street, sleeping on the bus, curled up in the backseat of a car life anymore, as happens to all good community organizers one day. But you may have an incredible gift for logistics. You may be serving God through spreadsheets. You may be serving God through registrations. You may be empowering people through education, through resource coming up with ideas and supports. And that if all of those are pointing inward towards those son words of, I'm here to create access and opportunity. Those are my core justice values. Then how you do it and how it shows up is equally of value, because you are honoring your core spirit values and your call to beloved community. So we're a lot less focused on how much juice can we extract from that withered orange of a body we got going on over here. And instead, how connected can we feel to the great network of the incredible diversity of gifts and talents in the beloved community? Oh, people, that's right, that's why we're doing this. Put a pin in that. Now, okay, how many of you have heard of or have all the nosy neighbors on Nextdoor? You know this one? Nextdoor it's an app, and they have it in the neighborhoods. It connects to your little electronic doorbells, and you get like 27 notifications every time somebody's cat went missing. And it's all the neighbors sharing their information. Well, it turns out when the Nextdoor app was officially launched, what it became was a racial profiling app. There were so many calls in neighborhoods of there's someone walking these streets that does not belong here. There's somebody in my neighborhood that appears suspicious. There are folks that seem like they're up to something. Well, what are they up to? Walking. Okay. But the Nextdoor app folks were like, all right, if this continues, we are absolutely not going to create the core value of neighborhood local connection. That was our goal when we thought, wouldn't it be a cool idea if even if we didn't know all our neighbors because we were all living in McMansions or, McMinis, and we didn't actually talk to each other anymore? So how do we make this app move better, faster, and more efficiently in a way that is helpful to get us to where we're going? Well, it turns out that moving better, faster, and more efficiently is what caused the problem. The emphasis on bigger, better, faster, more, on production, productivity, on results with the minimum investment, thought, and intentionality. How can we just get it done? With minimal training, with minimal conversation, with minimal awareness raising. I want to be able to click through these things while I am doing 6 other activities over here. It turns out that's exactly where the bias was born. The lack of intentional, thoughtful awareness of presence in process. And so after doing all kinds of research, bringing in a lovely set of PhD, Stanford researchers, the real intellectual, brainy bigwigs, they bring in the brains, and the brain said, well, what if instead of how much can I get done and how fast can I do it being your matrix of success, you slowed people down? So they added, right, because they're like, we're gonna talk to the people, we're gonna go in and we're gonna make all these wonderful anti-bias activities, and we're gonna try to do a workshop in the whole way we do the software. Let's dismantle the whole thing and rebuild it from the ground up. You know what they did? They added 2 slides with you have to scroll through the screen and click the box before you can advance. And the 2 screens, one gave just a few lines on bias reducing. But it was done through asking probing questions. If you are reporting someone suspicious, what makes them suspicious to you? Why are you unsure if they belong in this neighborhood? Is there a reason that you are thinking they are suspicious if you do not see any evidence of law breaking or harm doing? It was so short and simple, they even had to make the font real big so they could make you scroll so they knew you actually read it. It was that short. And then, once you clicked that box, you went to another that said, please remember that giving helpful descriptions are about describing someone's behavior, not what they look like. Please do not use your skin color or type of clothing as observation, but rather what is the activity that is causing you to question a person's intention. That's just more helpful for those reading through the app to be able to identify. Clicking those 2 boxes added about 30 seconds. That's right, we feeling this, because you picking up what I'm putting down, sis. And adding about 30 seconds to that process of why do you feel this way? Asking the questions, not making accusations, not saying, here, since you're probably racist if you on this app, read this and don't be. Just saying, tell me why, help me understand. Within launching that, 30 days, 95% reduction in bias-based, unfounded reports of unwanted people in the neighborhoods. So, pin removed. As we wonder about how are we going to save the church, right? We've all been in that conversation in some way, shape, or form. How do we get people to come to the teams and then to come to the teams and to be part of the work and also not bring centuries of baggage of unhealthy, unhelpful learned behaviors? How do we then go out and make all of the politicians and all of the leaders in government, academia, in all of the places and spaces in our neighborhood be the humans that we want them to be? Oh, I hate to break it to you, baby, but sin is real. But also, so is love. And that often when we take the human out of the equation and focus on what's the perfect policy, process, procedure, how much money do we need, and how much power can we put toward the solution of the problem, it turns out that the simplicity of relationship is too often the answer. And it's the one that is so accessible to us that we frequently skip right over it. Now, I promised you last night that I wasn't going to give you anything you couldn't easily download and use. I know, super accessible, right? This is how we used to look at community organizing and action. Now, I know because I certainly left the readers at home. I'm guessing that the bulk of you are like, I have no idea what's going on up there. I simply give that to you as a reminder of this is what we tend to do when we think about how we're going to do the work of justice. Well, we need a team that's going to put together our media releases. We need people doing door-to-door door knocking. We need folks that are gathering the petitions. We need to map our politicians and set up the legislative visits. We have the Saul Alinsky School of Community Organizing. We know how to get out the vote, and we know how to use these tools to dispatch our resources strategically across our community so that we can create change. No, what we can do is drive a certain number of people to a certain place on a certain day to get a particular outcome that is infinitely super quantifiable and limited. Our ideas, our historical ideas of community organizing are based on, I want to get this one person in office. I want to get this one law out of committee or passed. It is applying as many people as possible onto public pressure for a certain set of key individuals, and what that does is it threatens their money. How well has that worked for us, beloveds? We right back where we've been, are we not? So it turns out that you do not need to memorize this to change the world. This is a little bit more helpful. Those lovely big brains from Stanford that they brought in, they said it turns out that culture shift actually happens in 4 different places: ideas, institutions, interactions, and individuals. That we all have ideas. These are the places where bias can come from, because we get these ideas from our culture. We get these ideas from what great Uncle Jedediah told us about how you don't never let nobody take this land because it's ours, right? Because we can own like the creek that flows, that becomes clouds, that becomes rain, that is the source of being for countless people, places, and things. But yeah, let's put a name on paper and say it's ours. But these ideas, it turns out, are very much shaped by our institutions. Now, that's one thing I love about when I get to rock my Episcopal side, because you specifically developed a polity that says, we're not going to just say, this might be something we should think about. I currently serve in a Lutheran church, and we're very good at doing that. We're like, let's make this a suggestion, possibly, with every ability to opt out or debate it. But the idea of we actually believe that beloved community is a priority. Now, everybody's going to be called into it in different ways. They may even disagree, but it's like, no, this is what we believe, and we are going to put resources towards this. We are going to put ideas, and we're going to reinforce it. And it turns out that those ideas call to people and reach them, because when it comes from an institution of connection, it does influence ideas just through repetition, through regular reinforcement, through sharing messages, through raising awareness. So institutions do shape ideas, but so do interactions. And an interaction doesn't need to be a conference where you have 200 people, or 100 people, or 50. We talked about this a little bit last night. It turns out that to change a person's Harvard bias score and their peer-reviewed vetted test, it takes a relationship with one to make a more than 50% likeliness of measurable change in bias. So by intentionally putting people in connection with someone who is different than they are, we can change hearts and minds that way. And the same thing with being individuals who are working on raising our awareness and on learning. So encouraging opportunities for study, for participation, even if people don't engage in the way that we wanted or expect them to, that just by showing up or by reading or by seeing things, we have the ability to make change. Now, as I have told y'all, I'm not going to leave you hanging. You're going to get all these PowerPoints, beloveds. You are welcome to take all the snapshots. This is all public domain, and you are going to receive it. And there are links to the source articles if you are that human. Because I admit I am. I was like, I want to see the Stanford study. I want to read it. But it actually turns out that the organizing is beautiful. But what we really want is culture shift. And that when we are looking to change and shape cultures, it means getting to know who's there. It means making sure that we talk to our leaders and share personal stories, and that our leaders relate to us authentically and genuinely and tell us, here's how I feel and why. And that we give intentional opportunities for those affected to say, here's how I feel and why. It turns out we don't need all the super expensive, all the fancy. I drove here because I love getting coffee at the Cornerstone. I'm not the $8 million world famous human, but I deeply love God's people and God's church. And I'm a queer brown femme who happens to be also in a almost completely white, largely heterosexual mainline denomination. And yet, because I love to sing the songs and pray the praise, it turns out it's accessible for me to be here. And so I tell my story because when I walk into the room, I'm like, I hugged my people when I came in this morning. I'm like, ooh, seminary buddy. Ooh, mentor who gave me my first pulpit when I started seminary. Ooh, my friends that made beautiful necklaces for me last night while we prayed. Ooh, people that we talked about genealogy in the bathroom. You're actually statistically way more likely to remember every single thing that I share with you than you are to remember a completely remote and distant person. The journey towards justice is accessible, it is achievable, and it is relational. So I ask you as you go into these workshops today to open your heart as well as your mind and say, what if what we're doing is possible. Not how are we going to do it, what resources do we have to get, and who's not here to help. What if one person can shift the hopeful mindset of a room full of people? And what if that person is a neighbor, is a fellow parishioner, is someone who lives with all kinds of marginalized intersections, is someone who lives with disabilities, is someone who can't march out in the streets anymore? But what if they have a love for Jesus, a heart for justice, and just a willingness to share their story? Because it turns out, according to all the fancy data, that's actually all we need. God doesn't send us to do what God didn't equip us to do. So as you learn today, please remember that. What you need, you already have. And thanks be to God for that.